What's going on, guys? This is Lior and welcome back to my channel. Now, in this video, what I thought I would do is show you guys an example of a deal analysis for a deal that we bought last year and recently cashed out refinance. A lot of you guys have been asking me about underwriting and deal analysis, how I do it, and some of the things I look for. So I'll walk you through our acquisition deal analysis, show you the cash flow numbers, as well as the numbers behind the actual cash out refinance, so you can see exactly what I'm thinking when I'm looking at a deal. So with that, let's get at it. What's going on, guys? My name's Lior and welcome back to my channel. Now, before I get into it, super quickly, guys, if this is your first time on my channel, first of all, welcome. Second of all, make sure you smash that subscribe button for me. Subscribe to my channel because I put out tons of new videos every single week talking about everything under the sun for rental property investing, from strategies to buying, deal analysis like we're gonna be doing in this video, some of my tours of my properties. So if that's the kind of content that's interests you, make sure you subscribe to my channel. So with that, let's get right into the meat of the potatoes. So I'm gonna structure this video a little bit differently. I'm actually gonna share my screen with you guys where I'll actually show you my numbers of how I analyze the deal. Now, just to give you some quick context of the deal, this was a 4-unit rental property that we bought from an owner directly. Now, there were 4 tenants in the building, right? So the building was entirely leased out and they were all paying significantly below market rents, right? So their rents were literally between 50 to 60, 70% of market rents. So you'll see in my Excel sheet I'm gonna share with you guys in just a second, you'll see my as-is scenario where I have the rents of what we purchased the building at. Then you'll see the rents of where I thought we could get them stabilized to. So you'll see the difference of how much value we can add to the building. And then I'll show you guys the numbers behind the projected cash out refinance, which we actually already finished up about 2 months ago at this point. I did another video on that, but this will just give you really good understanding of how I analyzed the deal, what I thought we could do, and the full financials behind it. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys and let's get right into the numbers. All right, so welcome to my Excel sheet for this deal analysis. So again, this was a 4-unit property we bought that we stabilized, increased the rents, and hence increased the value. So I'm gonna show you guys, this is kind of my more basic cash flow projections, but it'll kind of give you guys an idea of some of the things I look at, what I look for, how I'm able to analyze some potential returns, as well as the cash out refinance scenario. You can see I have one column here, which is the acquisition pro forma. So this is basically my as-is scenario of when I bought the building, how it's going to be performing. This is for the first year. And then this is basically what I call stabilized operations, right? So this is me doing my value, right? Whatever it means, whether it's construction, increasing rents. So this is how I think the building is going to perform after the first year. So let's go right through these numbers. I'll show you guys exactly what I was thinking. So our purchase price on this was $925 for 4 units. Yes, you read that right. That's just what Boston's a very expensive market. And that's just what property goes for here. This is actually a pretty cheap price, if I will say. So 4 units should really be worth more in Boston. So that was our purchase price. We have some closing costs, right? That's, we financed this through a community bank. So this would include attorney fees, lender fees, basically other closing costs that we essentially need to budget for. Now on the loan, we did get construction portion to this loan because the units needed some cleanup, nothing major, but just some light cleanup work. So you can see here, I asked the bank for about $50,000. That should help me clean up the units. Then you can see my down payment, 25%, fantastic, 75% loan. And then this is also for me, this is my total equity raise. So if you guys remember, a lot of my deals, the way I do them is I actually partner with private investors, right? That help me fund the deal. So basically I like to get the down payment plus closing cost raised from the investors, plus a few other things that I won't get into right now. But the point is, I'm going to be asking, this will help me figure out how much money I need to get from private investors in order to help me fund this deal. Now, let's go into this bank
This is my debt section, right? So this is the debt I'm getting from the bank, right? So basically, first I want to know my total loan amount, which is acquisition and repairs, right? So this is just the 693 numbers plus the $50,000. Again, since I'm going to a community bank, this is not a hard money loan. Even though it's a commercial loan, I can still get a pretty attractive interest rate. So we got just about 4.25. I think we actually ended up getting a little bit less, if I remember correctly. But I thought I'd get right around 4.25 as an interest rate. And it is a 30-year fully amortized loan, which is very nice, especially in the commercial space. Now, let's go into the rents. So you can see I had 4 units, all 2-bed, 1-bath units. And here is the big difference, right? This was the rent roll that I bought the building with. And if I scroll down, you can see, yeah, the total was $5,100, right? So basically 3 units paying $1,200, 1 unit paying $1,500. And when I was analyzing this deal, I know the market very well. So I knew what I could eventually bump those rents to full market rent. And I thought I could get $2,250 per unit. I mean, each unit is identical, 2-bed, 1-bath. And actually $2,250 I thought was conservative. I thought I could probably even get $2,350, $2,400. But I thought I would just stay a little bit on the lower side and project $2,250 per door, right? So you can see the difference in the rent roll, right? I mean, when I first bought the building, had a rent roll of $5,100. What I thought I could get it to was almost double, up to $9,000. So, that's actually exactly what ended up playing out. Again, if you haven't seen my other videos on this building, including the cash out refinance building, I kind of jump into those details a little bit. But yeah, we literally almost doubled the rent roll by 2x. And the reason we were able to do that is these were actually all Section 8 tenants. And I actually know very well, I know exactly how to go about that, the process it takes to renegotiate those rents with the housing authorities directly, what needs to happen, what kind of work I need to do. So I felt very, very confident that we could hit this $9,000 rent roll, which we did. So now let's move to our operating expenses. So these are operating expenses that we're going to incur by operating the building. So first we're going to, I always have a vacancy allowance, right? So I typically use about 5% of my monthly gross rent rolls. So the math here is just literally 5%. This 5% times the gross rent roll. 5% is kind of the standard. I mean, Boston pre-COVID was kind of running around 4% in some areas. So I most of my deals I was underwriting around 5%. If I was a little unsure, I maybe bump it up to 6%. But on this deal, I felt pretty comfortable going to 5. So you can see that gives me an allowance for basically understanding that my units are not always going to be 100% rented. So I need to have some sort of vacancy allowance. Next is my PM or property management fee. We have an internal property management, and this is kind of our charge structure, 6% of the total gross monthly collected rent. So you can see once stabilized at $9,000, I should be getting billed just about under $550. Next is the repairs and maintenance budget. And I will say I underwrote this deal at this point. I mean, this was probably 18 months ago now, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And technically, I did not do this the right way, right? And here's why I say that. So when I underwrote this deal, I used this 5% line item, right? So basically 5% times the gross monthly rent roll to figure out my repairs and maintenance budget. Now, if you kind of read books and podcasts, that's what a lot of people do. But if you actually think about it, that doesn't really make sense to do, right? It doesn't really make sense that I would incur only $250 in maintenance at first, and then all of a sudden, because I am collecting more rent, all of a sudden now my maintenance budget is doubling, right? Because at the end of the day, if I get a clogged toilet or something's wrong with the kitchen, there's a leak in the kitchen plumbing or whatever needs maintenance, right? That cost is going to be pretty fixed, whether I'm collecting $5,000 a month or whether I'm collecting $9,000 a month, right? So it's not like my handyman's going to be like, oh, you're collecting below market rent, so I'm going to charge you less. Like, it doesn't work like that. So technically, this was actually, I think, honestly, an error on my end. I should have really had a full maintenance budget of about $450 to $500 on both of these line items here, right? Again, this was 18, 19, 20 months ago or something. So I've kind of sharpened up my deal analysis since then, but it's okay. It ended up not hurting me too much. But today, if you look at my updated underwriting, you won't kind of see that mistake again. Next, we have our water and sewer budget. This is pretty consistent no matter what the rent roll is, right? So this is just what I know I'm going to get charged for paying for water and sewer. The other utilities in the building, including the gas and electrical, were split, so the tenants were paying that themselves. Next, I have a common electric budget, right? Because basically I do have common space that has lights, right? And it is technically illegal to charge for lights, for common space lights to tenants. There is a separate meter that those common lights are on, and I get billed for that myself directly. So that comes out about 50, 60 bucks a month. Next, I have an other budget. Now you can see here again, I used kind of a, technical 1% of my gross monthly rents to figure this out. Again, that, if you think about it, that's just not really right? Like in reality, like it sounds good in theory, but in reality, when you really play it out, it doesn't make sense that you'll have less other costs like snow removal, pest contracts, or any other stuff that may pop up. It doesn't really make sense that cost would be different depending on your rent roll. The other thing too that I do today, I've certainly increased this budget as well. Today, I have this budgeted out for about 200 bucks a month, because most of my buildings today, I do put them on pest contracts for preventative reasons, right? I want to make sure the buildings are getting taken care of, and that my buildings don't ever experience any issues with pests. I also have people helping me with trash, making sure all the trash is getting properly removed. So, today I kind of have a flat fee of about 200 bucks or so. But again, this was 18 months ago. So I kind of just did your more standard, kind of 1-2%, and called it a day, which is not terrible. But I think now that I have more experience operating a lot more buildings, now we have almost 50 units under management. I kind of know the numbers a lot better, and what they should average out to. And finally is taxes and insurance. I mean, those numbers I just know because I'm in the market. I know what the tax rate is. I know what the tax bill will be. I also know what I'm going to get billed for insurance here. So those are pretty easy assumptions for me to make, just because, again, I operate in this market and I own a lot of other buildings. So now you can see my NOI calculation. Again, even though it's technically a 4-unit building, I do like to figure out what my NOI is. So you can see my total monthly income. Again, the stark contrast between 5,100 and 9,000. So you can see my total expenses, again, shouldn't be as big of a difference as it is here, like 700 bucks. So that's okay. You kind of get better as you go, as you do more of these analyses anyway. So you can see the difference in my monthly net operating income that I projected. Here literally almost double, right? I mean, it's a huge, huge difference in the monthly net operating income that I am projecting. Now let's talk a little bit about debt. You'll notice here that I have 2 different numbers for debt. And the reason for that is the way I structure the deals with the community banks is because this is a value add deal where I'm going to be doing a stabilization, right? Where I have quote unquote distressed property that's not performing at its potential. I'm actually able to negotiate an interest only period for the first month, right? Or for the first year, I'm sorry. So that means the first year I'm only paying interest only payments on the mortgage. And it's only until year 2 that I get to a fully amortizing loan payment, right? So you can see it's actually a stark difference of almost $1,000 per month. And this is good too, right? Because that first year, the rents are low, it kind of helps me with cash flow issues so that I don't bleed myself out too much as I'm trying to work around and stabilize the building. Next, I have my other expenses, which is just my CapEx budget. So I like to leave a CapEx budget of about $50 per unit per month. This is just a nice little budget that I can kind of reserve out for bigger ticket items like roof, furnaces, electrical issues. When I bought the building, it was in pretty good shape. The roof was actually newer. Heating systems were all in pretty good shape. So I felt comfortable that this is pretty solid reserve budget for this particular building. If for some reason I feel like a building is going to need a lot more reserves down the line, I might increase those numbers. So now we can kind of see the cash flow, and you can see exactly what I was looking at, right? Basically, Year one, we'd essentially be breaking even, if you will. I mean, 150 bucks is a rounding error, right? So year one, we'd essentially be breaking even as we go through and try to stabilize the building. But if I could get to that full stabilization where I'm collecting $9,000 per month in rents, you can see here that I'm going to be generating almost 2,500 bucks a month of free cash flow from 4 units, which is really, really good, especially in a market like Boston. I mean, honestly, most 3 families in Boston, cash flow maybe like $1,000. So generating $2,500 in cash flow from 4 units, that's like $600 per unit per month. Those are huge, huge cash flow numbers for Boston. So I was very, very excited about this kind of project because I knew there was a lot of cash flow upside. And finally, you can see some of my other financials. So first, you can see the debt service coverage. Now, you'll notice here that my debt service coverage on the as is was pretty low. It was 1.1. Now, if you know about debt service coverage ratios, typically lenders look for about 1.2 ratios and higher. But again, I talked to my loan officer and I explained to him the business plan, right? I told him, look, obviously the numbers are really low right now, but there's massive, massive upside. And I know, and I've already done this kind of project before. I know exactly what I'm going to have to do to stabilize this building. And you can look at the upside, right? I mean, if I can get the stabilized, the stabilized debt service coverage ratio is incredibly high. It's almost 1.7, which is incredibly strong. So I kind of had this conversation with my loan officer. And based on that, they were able to approve me, even though the upfront coverage ratio was definitely a little weak. And finally, you can see some of my cash on cash returns based on the building's performance. So you can see we needed about 250,000 bucks to get into this deal. And again, obviously year one, when we're not really have cash flowing, there's basically no cash on cash return. I mean, less than 1%, which is basically nothing. But if we can stabilize it, we can generate 11% cash on cash returns, which is literally completely blowing market standards out the water. I mean, in Boston, if you're hitting 6-7% on cash, you're doing really well. So the fact that we're able to generate this 11% at stabilization got me very, very excited about the project. So now I'm going to show you some of the assumptions I was looking at and the calculations I was looking at for the potential cash out refinance, right? Because, when we do these large value add buildings, we're obviously increasing the value of the building significantly. So I want to know what my potential is for doing a cash out refinance where I can pull out some money, and especially since I'm partnering with people and borrowing money, I want to see how much of that money I can return. This was a refinance scenario I ran where I would refinance within 3 years. Now, if you see my video that I did for this project, I actually stabilized the building within 6 months and then did a cash out refinance within 12. I think it was month 13 or month 14. So we really blew it out the park on this one. But I like to be conservative in case things go wrong, in case things take longer than I thought they would. I typically give myself a 36-month timeline, just so I can stay safe. So the calculation is pretty simple. What I do is first look at what I think the building's going to be worth, which I think is $1.3 million. The way I come up with that number is first, I think what that building is worth today once it's stabilized, right? So, if that building today was stabilized, what would this building be worth? I would do a comp analysis and then a net operating income analysis. And then I'm also going to extrapolate it to the future dollar value, right? Because you're going to basically have to account for real estate appreciation or market growth appreciation rates. I typically only use a 3% appreciation rate. And that's just essentially to keep with inflation. Now, Boston prices the last 5 years have been increasing by anywhere from 5 to 10%. But again, I like to stay very conservative and only use a 3% rate, rather than be pleasantly surprised rather than completely disappointed. Next, I'm going to look at the loan assumptions for that potential cash out refinance loan. So the loan of value would be up to 75%. Now, there's certainly lenders that will go higher, up to 80%. There's certainly lenders that won't go above 65 to 70%. I know a number of lenders that will do 75%, so I felt pretty comfortable using these kinds of numbers. Then for interest rate, I use 5%. You'll notice that's higher than today's interest rate, and that's just to kind of protect myself in case in 3 years when I do this, for some reason there was a hike in interest rates. I just don't want to be unpleasantly surprised because I didn't predict that, right? Because we're obviously in a very low interest rate environment today. Who knows what the market will look like in 2 or 3 years? So I'd rather just run the numbers based on a higher interest rate in case that's what ends up playing out. So then you can see I did the actual numbers. So the new, if I were to do that refinance, cash out refinance, this would be my new loan dispersed, right? And this is just this 1.3 number times 75%. Now, I also know what I would need to pay off from the original debt I borrowed, right? So it'd be 720. I'd get a new loan of 970, which means I would essentially be able to cash out $252,000, which is fantastic, right? Because if you remember, in order to get in this deal, I had to borrow about $245,000 from private investors. So what this negative number is telling me is essentially I would be able to completely pay off my investors, plus have about $7,000 left over, which is fantastic, right? Because I can cleanly cash them out, return them the full principal, and then have even a little bit of cash left over, which is amazing. Now, the last check I do on this is to make sure that the lender will feel comfortable issuing me these loans, right? Because even though I can certainly do this cash out, they're going to be doing a cash flow analysis in the future, right? To make sure that the building can support this new type of loan, right? To make sure that the bill, and they're going to do an analysis and make sure I'm not over leveraging and not taking too much debt for the building. So what I do is actually a yearly quick pro forma analysis, right? So basically I'll take a look at what my income will be in the future, right? So I've got my income. Again, I've got a line item for my operating expenses that I'll incur in the future. You'll see this is the new debt calculation based on the new loan. This would be my yearly debt payment, my yearly CapEx budget, and then my yearly cash flow, net cash flow line item. So the most important thing I'll actually look at is then the NOI and then the new debt service coverage ratio, because again, that's going to be one of the big things the lender is going to look at when he's going to be issuing my new loan, right? He's going to take a look at that and want to make sure that the financials and the cash flows support the new loan. So I can see here it's going to be 1.26, which I felt very good about because most lenders in Boston want to be at about 1.2. So not, I would obviously be exceeding that. So the lender should feel comfortable in issuing this loan, right? And just to kind of drive the point home, if I wanted to, for example, run the numbers at 80%, right? So let's say I was able to somehow magically find a lender that was going to do an 80% cash out refinance. One thing that I would need to look at is I would say, well, the issue is even though I might, even they might offer a 80% cash out refinance, this building might not necessarily support it, right? Because they'll do their cash flow analysis and they'll see, oh, wait a minute, Lior, you're only getting me a debt service coverage ratio of 1.18, and that's below our standards of 1.2. So they might not even issue this sort of loan to me, even if that was a product offering in their, from their bank, right? Because this building can't necessarily support that big of a new loan, right? So instead of a 970 loan, it'd be like a 1,030,000 loan. And that might just be too much debt for this building to support. But because I'm running it at 75%, the debt service coverage ratio is good enough. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how I ran my numbers for this kind of particular deal. This is not an extensive analysis. I kind of go deeper into the numbers once I'm really working with investors and the bank. But this is just a good overview of what I look for when I purchase, buy, and hold deals, especially when there's a value add component to them. So hopefully that makes sense, guys. If you guys have any questions, just shoot them below.